After my wife passed away, I bought an RV to explore the country. The very next day, my son's wife took my keys. "You're far too old for this. We're taking you to a retirement home." I didn't argue. Once they drove off, I texted my son, "Look inside the glove box." The moment he saw what was there, he pulled over without hesitation. I signed the papers that morning. The dealer shook my hand and told me I was going to love how she handled on the open road. I nodded, but what I was really thinking was that this was the trip my wife and I had planned for 20 years. We always said we'd do it together, after retirement, after the kids were settled. She never made it to retirement. I made it alone, at 66. Her picture already taped to the dashboard before I'd even driven the thing off the lot. I parked the RV in my driveway that afternoon and stood there looking at it for a long time. It felt like the first big thing I'd done just for myself in longer than I could remember. The neighbor's sprinklers were running somewhere down the block. A dog barked twice and went quiet. Ordinary sounds, except I hadn't felt like this in over a year. I should mention my daughter-in-law here, because it matters for what comes later. She'd started asking careful questions not long after the funeral, at the reception itself, wanting to know in that soft, concerned voice of hers whether my wife and I had gotten around to updating the will before she passed. I told her yes, and changed the subject. She nodded slowly, the way people do when they're filing something away rather than actually listening. My daughter-in-law showed up the next morning before I'd even unpacked the groceries. She walked straight past me into the kitchen without waiting to be asked in. My son came in behind her and stood by the doorway, not saying anything, not looking at me either. "We need to talk about this," she said, nodding toward the window where the RV sat gleaming in the driveway. "Talk about what? You living alone, buying something like that. It proves you're not managing well on your own anymore." I told her I was managing just fine. She didn't seem to hear me. She had a way of talking that made it clear the conversation had already been decided somewhere else before she ever walked in. "We've looked into a place," she said, "a retirement community. Very active, lots of programs. It would be so much better for you than being out here by yourself with no one checking on you." I looked at my son. He kept his eyes on the floor. "You're far too old for this," she said, gesturing at the RV like it was evidence in a trial. "We're taking you to a retirement home." I didn't argue. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't because I agreed with her. It was because I already knew arguing wouldn't change anything, not with her. Not that morning. My wife used to tell me that you lose an argument the moment you raise your voice, because the other person stops listening to your words and starts listening to your tone instead. So I kept my voice level, and I didn't fight. She held her hand out for the keys. She didn't ask twice. She just stood there with her palm open, like she already knew I'd hand them over. Like resistance wasn't a possibility she'd bothered to plan for. I gave her the keys. I watched from my front window as they backed the RV out of my driveway. My son sat in the passenger seat, staring down at his phone instead of looking back at the house, instead of looking at me. I don't know if that was shame, or if it was just easier than meeting my eyes. Maybe both. Once they were gone, I sat down at my kitchen table. My hands weren't shaking, which surprised me a little. I picked up my phone and typed one line to my son. "Look inside the glove box." I didn't attach anything else. No explanation. I set the phone down and waited. 4 minutes went by. My phone rang once. I looked at it and let it ring out. I wasn't trying to make him wait out of spite. I think I just needed a moment before I heard whatever came next. The kitchen was quiet except for the clock on the wall. It rang again. This time I answered, my thumb hovering over the screen for a second before I finally pressed it. All I heard at first was his voice, and it wasn't steady. "Dad," he said, "why is there a folder in here with my name on it, in Mom's handwriting?" I closed my eyes before I answered. "Read it," I said. I already knew what was in that folder. I'd put it there 3 months after my wife passed. Once the doctors told her how little time she had left, and she'd written her daughter-in-law a letter she never got the chance